A big welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for being here for what is a very special live recording of 40-Minute Mentor with two of the ultimate goats of the talent ecosystem. Friends of mine, wonderful supporters and just incredible people, Charles and Sandra. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
They're going to share their insights on a topic that is incredibly important, which often will make and break the success of a startup, which is all around building high-performing teams, which is a passion topic for myself and many people in this room, and I can't wait to dive into it, particularly in this new world, this AI era that we're in. Two people that have seen it up close and personal, super excited to dive into everything. I've known you both for a little while now, but our audience may not, so I thought we could start with some intros. We'll go ladies first. Sandra, if you don't mind, just introducing yourself and your current role at Index.
You will hear the accent as we go through, but it changes depending on who I'm talking to. So I currently lead Index talent function here in Europe. Joined Index almost 5 years ago. I don't think I have to tell you more about this organization, what we do, but we're celebrating 30 years this year. So I find it's like one of those milestones in the VC industry where you really can reflect back on all the things that have been achieved and what we're seeing right now. I started my career in the wrong place and relatively quickly figured that out and have then shifted into all kinds of different roles that go around people and talent. I've advised over 6,000 people on their career while I was at INSEAD. I was a chief people officer, so I know how hard it is when you have the theory and then you actually have to apply it into practice. Went into headhunting and came here, and you can see it from the fact that I am prepared. I'm originally German. I have come via France to the US and then the UK, so I also bring like a perspective from different markets and different backgrounds.
Thank you. And Charles, over to you.
So my name is Charles. I'm from France. You can hear my accent. That's very true. So I spent about 17 years in SF in the Bay Area. One of the couple of like highlights there is I built a company called Gusto, which is a payroll provider. It's a YC-backed company. And when I say built, is like I helped to hire those folks from 30 to about 1,000 by the time I left. Now the company is like much bigger, so that's kind of like what I was doing there. Then I worked for a company at an Elon Musk company called Neuralink. It's a brain-machine interface. So if you don't know what a brain-machine interface is, it's a brain that's connected to your computer. And basically 2 years there working directly with like Elon and his CEO office to hire the best talent in engineering in different fields that are needed. And then I worked at Meta at the corporate office in Menlo Park, and I was doing exec and leadership recruiting there, mostly on like the analytics side, data engineering and data eng, staffing for VPs and directors. And then I worked at a VC here in London called Local Globe, which is like an early stage investor of many companies that you're aware of. And then I recently started at Lovable. So I work in Stockholm, but I'm currently based in London and relocating to Stockholm in a few weeks. And I'm married and I have a son. My wife is American and my son is French-American.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. And I'm so glad we were able to get you, Charles, before you relocated.
Yeah.
So thank you for making the time. Clearly, those are unbelievably distinguished careers, and you've worked with some of the greatest entrepreneurs that have ever graced this planet. We should probably start with Elon Musk, a polarizing figure, of course, but no doubt has an eye for talent. So I'd be very keen to hear your learnings from working with him and any particular things that have stood out to you in that experience.
So I am a fanboy of Elon. My wife probably like complains about how much I love him, but I would just say I am a fanboy of Elon as an entrepreneur, and I would leave it at that. Like I think he's done other things since then, but I really respect him and look up to him when it comes to become an entrepreneur and to be an entrepreneur. And some of the highlights working with him and for him, I think, is one, he doesn't really play in the hype game, meaning that it boils down to the fundamentals with him and the principle and the first principle thinking. So I don't think he gets hyped by a logo or company or like what you've done in the past. I think he relies very heavily on internal interview processes that we built, and those indicators are very important to him. Second thing is, I think he came to the office one day with a hammer and was like, you're not asking the question why. why and why enough. So like peeling as often as possible why someone would make a career decision, answer a question a certain way. He was very pragmatic around this, and he wanted to boil it down to first principle thinking. Then he's got a couple of triggers. So this might be kind of like polarizing, but it's Elon, so it's fine. But essentially, he's not a big fan, or the way to phrase it, I would say, is like he's very careful about a ratio, like PhD theory versus like actually producing things in real life and real time. So I think if you think about a ratio for like a product or like an AI thing or like a R&D project, he probably wants to have one PhD hire for like 20 engineers who are actually going to ship and produce something. So he's very careful around this. He's also very careful around MBAs. I'm sorry if anyone has an MBA here, but he just basically boils down to actually people who are doers. He says that people who have an MBA usually make slides, but they're not always like a doer. So like he really wants to vet for this. So this really kind of like stayed with me super, super strong, because whenever I go to a new place and I help the place to hire, whether I'm at a VC or like now at Lovable, I sort of have that in the back of my mind that like he really cared about this, and that came very strong for me. The last thing that I would say is that he's huge on tenure. And he thinks that essentially like anyone who's worked at a company for under 2 years hasn't had the chance to actually build a legacy and leave a footprint. So if you see like a candidate who's gone from like, one company to another over and over again under 2 years, for him, that would be a major flag. And it would be like, look, like if you work at a company and you really want to leave a print, you probably have to spend more than 2 years at this company. So these were like sort of the principles that we operated with to hire for him.
That's super interesting. Thanks for sharing. Sandra, to you, Index, best-in-class founders. You'll have seen them all across different stages, geographies, industries. I know this is like asking who your favorite child is, but I have to ask, who are the founders that stand out to you, and why, particularly when it comes to hiring exceptional talent?
I will answer the exact same way that I tell my children I don't have a favorite. No. But I did kind of think back about like, are there any common traits that I see coming back over and over again in those founders that are able to attract like top talent? And for me, it boils down to a couple. The first thing I would say is they're intensely creative and I would probably also very intentionally about the creativity and the curiosity that comes with that. So they don't go in saying like, I have all the answers, I know exactly what I want. They really go like, what does best in class look like? Not just today and in the past, but tomorrow. What do we actually need? And they're able to shift around, some of them way before they need really senior talent. So I have some very, very early stage founders who are already talking to people who might only join them when they are at 100 or million plus in revenue. And in today's world, who knows how fast that will be. They build those networks. They might rope them in as advisors, and they might bring them on board in some ways so that they can pull the trigger when they're ready to hire, and they will have made their selection already. So they kind of are winning at identifying top talent way earlier. They're intentionally in everything they do. So speed, and I'm sure we'll come back to how you hire and how you hire fast, but speed is intentional. How they make decisions and what kind of decisions is really important, and how the candidate experience makes you experience the culture so that you can filter through who will actually work with us really well is there. And then I would say in today's time, they experiment and are not afraid to fail. So a lot of them, playbooks are dead. What somebody else does, I don't think you should look into it anymore. It's like, what's the problem we're trying to solve? How does it work for us? And they iterate really, really fast in the same way they do on a product.
That's super interesting, and really resonates with what we're seeing with our clients at the moment. Charles, Lovable. It is one of the darlings, if not the darling of the European tech scene, one of the fastest growing companies in the world. I mean, what a cool place to be heading up talent. What does building AI native teams actually look like at a place like Lovable in 2026?
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear your thoughts from someone that's been on the VC side recently, working with founders. What has changed in the past 2 years? And what's that like in practice?
So much has changed. I mean, I think speed is the one thing where I'm blown away by Lovable, is how fast they work and how fast they move. I think one of the things that surprised me the most is like the agency that Anton, the CEO, is willing to give to his employees by making decisions on their own. There's no approval layers. meaning that like if you want to make a decision, you want to hire, you should go for it. So there's this founder mindset at Lovable. In fact, I think out of 130 employees that we have, 43 or 45 are ex-founders, which just shows like the DNA of this company and like almost operating like a little bit siloed in like making decisions on their own. We use quite a bit the probation period, which, you know, it's like a good thing and a bad thing. I would say the good thing is like we can actually make hires a lot faster, and then we can let go of folks who are not working out and where Lovable is not the right fit, like very fast as well. I talk about this quite a bit, but like I've never been in a place where acquisition and acquihire matters so much. So technically, like Lovable is like a Series A, Series B, depends on how you want to look at it. It doesn't really matter, but it's like very early on. The company has been around for 18 months and already has an M&A function, which if you think about OpenAI, Anthropic, they probably had an M&A function like 3 or 4 years after the company was created. And so what this means is basically we look at acquisition as a way to hit our hiring target as fast as possible. And so we look at it in both like technology that we don't have, like a technology gap that we don't have on the team, and then how can we hire like 20, 30 engineers as fast as possible so that we can ship. The name of the game at Lovable is shipping as fast as possible. There's nothing else that matters. So we have to ship. Why? Is because if you don't ship new products, you don't get new customers. If you don't get new customers, you don't capture more market share, and then Lovable will stop to exist at some point because competition will take over. So the way that we can stay on top of competition is by building as fast as possible and shipping. And you see the speed in execution, in shipping, and hiring, and everything that we do. Like I used to be at a company like Gusto or like other companies at Meta where like literally making a decision like, should we hire an exec? Would take like 3 months. You'd write a memo. You'd be like, this is the kind of profile that we need. At Lovable, it's like, let's hire someone. Like, let's go. Like, you open the search. You don't even do a kickoff. You just like, let's go. Let's just hire this exec. And we're talking about an exec where like they might relocate the family. Their comp package are insane. And that's kind of like a decision that you make like on the whim, like super fast.
Yes, it's incredible, isn't it? How times have changed. The speed is exhausting and exhilarating, and amazing to see. Today's interesting because Olix, who you very kindly introduced me to, announced this huge 220 million round. We just placed their COO, and that process was less than 5 weeks, probably 4. A relentless intensity to it, and a huge amount of rigor went behind it, but the speed was unbelievable. Sandra, in this market where the velocity is unlike anything else and the competition for talent is so strong, particularly amongst the fastest growing businesses, what can founders do to stand out from the crowd to, you know, win that battle?
I must say personally, I'm very opposed to using all this war terminology that is very prevalent in San Francisco and is kind of coming over from time to time here. But we have been in these situations before where the market was so buoyant and hot that the employee and candidate actually had the upper hand. And you needed to hire incredibly fast and you needed to find the right people, and they had usually multiple offers and you needed to tell them a story of why they had to come to you. And that hasn't changed. What's changed right now is the speed and the number of companies who are doing it concurrently. And I think in Europe what has changed, which is actually great, but wasn't the same before. You have a lot of US native AI companies pushing into the market. You have a lot of established players pushing into the market. They're all coming to Zurich and to Stockholm and to London and to other places. And then you have this wonderful crop of European companies that are going at scale and they're winning globally. So all of a sudden European brands are being recognized in Silicon Valley way before they would have been previously. So all of this is happening at the same time. The way I think about it, and I talk about it for founders, for me, there's like 3 big things as a founder and the person who's hiring who needs to, it's 3 areas to tackle. One is you need to understand your USP. You actually need to sit down and not just say, this is what we're building, but this is how we're building it. And therefore, you need to define what kind of person works incredibly well in my organization. And if I boil it down, and then not in our portfolio, at Cursor, it's you don't go to meetings, you do things. And you have the autonomy to do things. So if something bothers you, you just build it yourself and, you know, off you go. So the autonomy and people who don't want to waste their time in meetings work incredibly well in the Cursor process. Anthropic doesn't have titles. Like, you're all the same. Like, there's no distinction. And there's engineers do research, researchers do engineering project. Like, there's a boundary that gets blended in a way. So you need to be comfortable with that. One of our portfolio companies, Wonderful, if you go on their careers page, there's like one sentence that distills everything that you're looking for in a person that will work well. And I can tell you the majority of people will read this and go like, no, thank you. So instead of saying like, this is why you shouldn't work at Google, or this is why you should come should not go to OpenAI, really think about like, why should you come to us and what is it? So that's the first thing. The second thing is the show, don't tell. If you say that it's fast decision making, it's not a lot of meetings, and then your process takes forever, and there's new meetings being added on, and so the culture gets experienced in these fast processes, right? So you need to be really intentional about how you're doing that. And then to win, and this is, it's going to get harder, is like, you can't win on compensation, you have to win on mission. So you need to understand compensation, and you need to understand the different levers, and you need to be able to explain them, which includes explaining how does this role contribute to our outcome that I'm telling you about, and why you should accept and be excited about the equity. But you also need to know for yourself, what's the cliff for the vesting period, so that you can make a decision on whether they're the right person or not before that cliff hits. You need to understand that sometimes giving them more equity and backdating it so that the vesting schedule isn't linear is great, because it buys you a couple more years to figure out how much they really contribute. And most importantly, you need to understand what motivates the person, because it might be totally different things. It might be your mission. We see the kind of people Anthropic attracts are different than the kind of people OpenAI attracts in many ways. And so you need to really talk about what is it that makes you unique in you're building, and how can they contribute to it. And you need to understand their motivators and relate everything back to that.
And I'm certain that pensions probably isn't a word that you expected to hear at an AI-focused event on scaling high-performing teams. And what we see is that businesses are spending thousands, if not millions of pounds on their most expensive employee benefit, which is pensions, but it's driving no engagement and no interaction actually from that business. So that's why we built Penfold. Penfold is the modern-day workplace pension platform that actually drives incredibly high engagement rates with employees. We're now trusted by thousands of UK businesses and loads of names in the tech sector, the likes of Anthropic, Airwallex, Lovable, Deal, Capital on Tap, and 11 Labs are using us because they know that we're the solution that will improve engagement with their workforce as they scale their business. And luckily, we're free to the employer, no cost, and you can switch to Penfold within a 30-minute phone call, so very easy to do that. So what we want to do is we want to ensure that your money that you're spending on this benefit is working as hard as your employees are, with a pension benefit that really works.
Amazing. Absolute gold dust. Thank you. I guess when it comes to moving at this sort of pace, I'd love to hear your thoughts on like how you can avoid making expensive mistakes. Clearly probation is one aspect, but I think balancing the rigor to make these like really key hires at the speed that you need to, that's a really challenging thing to do, and often we've seen historically, getting the wrong exec hire, for instance, can be terminal. So what are both your thoughts? I don't know whoever would like to take this one first, but how do you balance those two things?
So for me, one of the areas I think quality and speed are actually not opposable forces. You can have incredible quality and go very fast. It's when it's unstructured speed that I think a lot of things break. And so again, it comes back to the being intentional. So really thinking about like, what do you want to do? So be disciplined in your process, know who's going to contribute, know how you're doing these kind of things. Front loading the calibration, I think, is really important, rather than having a vast amounts of CVs. We saw it, I can't remember the number, but I think Synthesia and 11 Labs recently published how many people apply for each of the roles. It's insane. And you can't really filter through all of the AI applications anymore, and you don't really know. If you don't know what you're looking for in a person for a specific role, it's going to get a lot harder to sift through it. So if you front load the calibration and really go like, what do we need? What are the characteristics? What are the nice to haves versus the must haves? How are we going to make a decision, including who is giving us an opinion in the interview and who's giving us a decision-making criteria? That's important. Compressing the decision-making process, I would always try and get as fast as possible to the do we interview, and if yes, do we move them to the next stage? and communicating that back, because they're likely in many processes and they're getting approached by many people. And we were just chatting about this. I haven't seen it in Europe as much, but in Silicon Valley, people are getting job offers without ever meeting the company and being interviewed. They're landing in their inbox with we have scoured the market. We know exactly that it's you we need. This is your salary.
Wow.
This is the role. Would you like to come to a conversation? Call me. And it works. Like it's very, different, but it works with some, I would say, not with others. So you need to know that that's what's happening in the market. And then really separate what is recoverable versus what is irrecoverable. If you hire a very important key senior person in your team, somebody who will influence culture, who will influence the talent that comes, your product, you better make sure that you slow down. That is a really tough mistake to kind of unwind. It happens and it will happen. But that is a hard mistake to unwind. If it's a more junior role, or if it's a role where you think like, hey, maybe there's 3 or 4 people, I don't quite know which one will make it, will figure it out. I think it is much easier to unwind the decision that you've made as well.
Great.
A lot of things that Sandra, you mentioned is true. I mean, I would love to say that we do this at Lovable very well, but probably not true. Other things that I think are very important right now, I know this sounds very kind of like typical, but spikes. I think we're very clear about hiring folks who spike like hardcore into a dimension, and we're almost willing to compromise on other things in their profile if they spike really hard into one dimension. So I give you an example. Like I think, given the speed of the execution being like so important, if you hire and find an engineer who can like ship faster than like most of the candidates that we talk to, it's very likely that we're going to make an offer to this candidate because they spike really into one dimension. And then in the age of AI, I know it's weird to say this, but human connections matter so much more. So actually we don't really do that many, like we do, but like it's maybe not 100% of the interviews are not the traditional interviews where you have like, hey, cross-functional interview, or like, hey, like how is this product interview, or what is your coding skills. We bring a candidate on a Friday night, on a Friday we fly them, family included. They spend a day, they do like what we call a work session. It's a VIP experience where you come, you stay at a hotel in Stockholm, and then we basically spend a whole day or sometimes 2 days working with you. I think this brings a lot better signal, and the chances of closing this candidate are actually much higher than like doing the typical interviews where they go through like 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 interviews that are like super defined in a box.
Yeah, creating the time for that deeper connection is the best, especially because what you want both sides to be as bought in. You want both sides to have the same level of conviction. If you don't take the time to do that at a deeper level, you're opening the chance for them to go elsewhere, I think. And so I love that, absolutely love that. I guess we've got an audience here of a number of founders, a number of people in operator roles. We'll have founders watching this back. We always like to talk about the harder parts of the job, the mistakes that can get made, and how we can try and solve for those. So what are the common mistakes you've seen over your career that founders can make when it comes to hiring and hiring decisions? And what tips and advice can we give them that we haven't already?
I mean, I can share a few. I think doing one mistake that founders often do is they don't do a debrief post-hire. Super important. Even if you make a good hire, or like if it's a successful hire, you should do a debrief always. I mean, the more senior, that matters so much more. You always can get better. You always learn a lot. So that's really good. I think being decisive, being an operator and then working for a founder, one thing that you expect from a founder is to be decisive. Whether you're going to agree with them or not, one mistake that you can do is not knowing or not making a decision. Like I think we expect the founder to be super decisive, especially towards the end of a process, so that we can move forward. And then if we make a mistake, we leave and we learn. But I think these are like 2 common mistakes that I see when it comes to hiring, is not debriefing and then not also be decisive enough.
I totally agree. I would add, I have so many more. And by the way, I include myself in that. I have made pretty much any mistake you can make on hiring. So even when you know things theoretically, the practice of it, I think it's more an art than a science. I alluded to it a little bit earlier. The confounding scaling and linear growth, that is gone. And I think traditionally, on average 200K ARR per employee was like the metric that people were kind of going at, and that's how they had their forecast and their budget and their headcount. Mid-Journey, 11 people to 200 million ARR. So that's 18 million per employee. Lovable, I think we're 50 people at 100 million AR, and you said like you are now 130 people at almost 300. So you can do that. Cursor, 20 people to 100 million AR in 12 months, right? So it's actually what we're finding is you have to have a mindset shift of not thinking about how many people will I have, but how does that actually accelerate my growth, and does that allow me to be getting more market share, winning, and having the first mover's advantage before everybody else moves in, because competition is everywhere all of a sudden, right? You need to think about this. Not using the references. And I mean by this not actually real references as a tool, both to weed out who's a great storyteller, and did they actually do what they said they did? Like, would their boss agree, and their peers, and are they as well liked by their peers and people who worked with them on teams than they are by the people they reported to? But also to really set it up as like founders. I find a couple have told me, oh, I don't do references. Like my talent person, my people person does that. Huge mistake. It's like a competitive advantage for you for your onboarding and accelerating their onboarding, right? Asking the question, if you were coaching me as a new manager, how do I recognize when they're not doing well? How do I best help them? How do I, like, what do they need from me so that they can be at their best? Like, those, I think, are questions that most people don't ask, and it will just help you when you're having the person. And the question of AI, I think Shopify CEO has declared that he's no longer giving anybody headcount in the organization unless they can prove that AI can't do it better. And so you have to go through this exercise very regularly on, the technology is changing. Can you build agents that do part of the role, and therefore you shift the headcount to a more value add role? Do people understand how to work with them? So you need to continue to train them. So there's a lot of shifts happening in the industry right now that, from a company building perspective, I think are going to be entirely different.
I wanted to come on to, before we get to a Q&A, wanted to come on to talk about high performance. I would love to hear, it's obviously words that are bandied around all the time. We know how important it is to build high performing teams and cultures. What does it mean to you both? And, how can you test for high performance when it comes to interviewing, talent in an interview process?
I think it's really important to contextualize what you mean, but also make it stage appropriate. Like, what's high performance in a 10-person startup is not what's high performance in a 1,000-person organization that is on its path to IPO. So you need to make sure that you know what you're looking for at the time and define that. So in the beginning, probably not about hitting quarterly OKRs. It's about shipping product, iterating, learning, questioning all the time, and kind of doing things and raising the bar for everybody around you. As you evolve, you do have to have processes. Things will break otherwise. You do have to think about, especially as you're going closer to IPO, people will pay attention to whom you hire much more on the senior level. People will pay attention to your processes much more, to your risk, your cybersecurity. So there's all of these things that happen, and performance might look slightly different at different times in your scaling journey. For me, the most important is always structure your interviews. Don't just go in. There are some fantastic storytellers, really amazing storytellers, but you need to go in and figure out, did they really do what they said they do? And how do I find that out? I do a structured competency-based interview, and I keep asking questions. Okay, what happened then? And tell me more. What did you learn? How did you apply that? Instead of just glossing over, going into storytelling and kind of going into a different direction. You do that early on, you kind of get the DNA, almost the essence of what you're looking for. So you have to have not a formal process. I don't think you want to too early implement those, but you have to have an understanding of how do you measure success? What does it look like? Is failure part of it? Is iteration part of it? How do you feed back to people, and how do you make decisions both on hiring, salary, promotions that are linked back to the performance? And that's how you kind of start building the culture around it.
Yeah, I mean, I think performance cycles are long time gone. Yes, because you don't have to spend 20 hours a week writing peer feedback and going over. And I think now it's mostly quick pulses. They're more frequent, but like you sort of have like one question that you would ask to a manager, and the manager would be, is this direct, like working or not working, and then what can be done. But it's like a very small touches. Now there's not like a formal like performance cycle. I remember at Meta when I was there for almost 4 years, there was this whole thing called performance cycle PSC, and essentially it would take like maybe the whole first 2 weeks of January going through PSCs, and it would be very time consuming. And this is long time gone, and I think Meta even like got rid of it as well. So that's something to be aware of. And I totally agree with Sandra that like adaptability is what matters the most. So obviously in like a very early stage startup and in a very fast growth, the only thing that can matter right now is how can you be adapting to the environment as an individual, and that's probably the number one thing that can spikes on the performance for folks.
I find one thing that has stayed true. So we did this we put out a book called Scaling Through Chaos about 1.5 years ago, where we looked at, by then, the 210 most successful tech businesses and who were their first 1,000 employees, and kind of looked at the data of what really happened with those first 1,000 employees, who got promoted, how many stayed, what kind of functions, when was the VP layer introduced, and all of those things, and then matched it up with, we have almost 30 years worth of founder journeys and questions that come back. And somehow similar questions come back throughout the journey. Like, when do I transition from having a co-founder who's a CTO to maybe hiring a CTO and bringing them in from the outside? When do I start having more sales than engineering leaders, and all of those things? And one of the things that really came out is like where founders are spending their time. 50% of your time is spent on people issues. 50% of your time. Now, most people will see this and go like, yeah, in the beginning, because I'm just hiring and then I'm going to move on. No, it's like throughout. What that 50% is shifts, right? But you have to, like, your people are your product. Like, this is the most important thing. And even in a world where you might not need 1,000 people or more, even in a world where you can reach, the 200 million AR with 11 people, your people is the most important. And so you need to spend time with them and on them, on also modeling that performance culture and going after it.
Very well said. I'm very conscious of time. There's so much we could cover, and there's so many questions I have, but I'll maybe ask one more. AI has transformed everything, and it will continue to, and it is, you're seeing it firsthand. So what are your predictions for 2026 and beyond when it comes to how AI will continue to impact the trends we're seeing when it comes to building high-performing teams, attracting talent, and retention as well?
One prediction is maybe there will be chief talent officer. I think it's becoming such a key part of the company's success in how to build, and it's such a strategic function now that maybe this is stupid, but I feel like maybe chief talent officer, you could get to like a C-level in talent. Another thing is, I kind of alluded to it, is the fractional exec thing, where it could be very possible that an exec comes as a resident almost and does like a mission and then moves on from the mission. This could be a prediction for 2026. And then not a prediction, but awareness that, there's a wave right now. I don't want to call it a bubble, but like it's clearly a wave of AI. And so you have to stay humble. And I tell this to my team all the time. Like, I think, yes, like we are an AI native company. Things are going well. We've got like great brand, but like chill a little bit. Like, it's fine. Like, we are like we're fine. Like, we're not reinventing the wheel. Like, we're not better than anyone else. Things have been done for many, many years before for a reason. And I'd love to predict that 2026 will show that like people who are like not thinking that they have it down just because right now there's a huge wave of AI, it's like they're right. I do think that like the fundamentals in people are still there, and 2026 will show that.
Mm-hmm. Very well said. And the fractional piece is super interesting. It's probably the fastest growing part of JBM. And we've had our busiest quarter so far with companies reaching out about fractional execs across all different functions and areas. So let's see where that trend goes, but it's super exciting. What about you, Sandra?
I agree with what we said earlier. I don't believe AI is going to replace talent recruitment or any of this. I do believe that understanding how not to treat it as a tool, but treating it as almost like an organizational philosophy will create a wider gap between recruiters and companies who know how to hire and those who are going to stay behind. And then I'll give you an example. I had one of our founders last week, within 24 hours, built an AI agent that can do the work of a junior sourcer. And it's an intelligent agent. It communicates with you if you start engaging in a conversation, and it also creates the outreach mechanism and the probability of whether is it WhatsApp, is it email, is it LinkedIn, in 24 hours, right? Because for them, everything they do in the organization is AI native, and so interacting with agents and building them all the time is a part of it. And I think they will gain significantly speed in the getting to, yes, we want to interview this person. But the other thing that they're doing is they're really relying on human judgment and the nuance that comes with that. And so they're really intentional that the core decisions that get made are made by people and continue to be made by people. And for me, that is the other big prediction for this year as well, that it will not happen that those big, really important decisions will get taken over. I do believe that their nuance and being able to feel is going to be something that distinguishes us even more.
Super interesting and very reassuring, actually. I can't thank you both enough. You're two of the busiest people I know. So to take the time out to talk to us today and share your incredible insights, it's hugely appreciated. So I just want to say a big thank you. And yeah, I'm sure our audience would like to do the same. So
Thank you.
Thank you.